Okay, so we have to find the equation of this graph. And as you can see, this is a sinusoidal function. So let's say if this was a sine graph, the formula of this would be y equals a sine b times x. Here, let me make that a little better. X minus h plus k. Now, you might be wondering, what do these values mean? What does the a mean? What does the b mean? So the a means the amplitude. And the amplitude is the range of the y values in the graph. And the b value is the horizontal dilation, which tells you how stretched apart the graph is or how shrunk it is. And h is something called the phase shift. And finally, k is, you could probably guess, the vertical shift. Okay, and the phase shift is how much the graph has moved to the left or right, and the vertical shift is how much the graph has moved up or down. Okay, so if we were to find the equation of this graph, we could first find the amplitude, which I think is the easiest to find right off the bat. So A is going to equal, so we see that the midpoint starts at y equals 0. So we could say this is the y equals 0, and then the bottom is -2, and the top is at 2. So to find the amplitude, we just have to see the difference between the middle to the middle to the bottom, or the top to the middle. So we see that this is 2, the 2 units, and this is also 2 units. So we can just say a equals 2. And then now the b value. So the period of a parent sine function is always going to be 2 pi. And let's see if the period here is 2 pi. So it starts at pi and it ends at 3 pi. And the difference between that is 2 pi. So that means the b value is just going to be 1, because there's no horizontal dilation. And now let's see if there's a phase shift. So h equals, okay, so normally the graph should start at the origin, but you see it's shifted to the right pi units. So we can just say that h equals pi. And then finally, the k value. Let's see if the graph is shifted up or down. And no, it hasn't, because the middle point is at y equals 0 instead of -1, 1, or anything. So we can just say k equals 0. And now if we plug it all into this equation, we can see that y equals 2, and then sine, and then b, we don't have a b value, so we don't have to put anything, x minus, and we see that is pi, so we can just put pi. And always remember the minus. It's always going to be minus this value. And if this was like a negative, then this would be plus. And then plus k, which is 0, so we don't have to put anything. And that is it for the sine. And now let's say if we were to find the cosine graph of this. So you can say the only thing that changes in a cosine graph is the phase shift, because the amplitude, vertical shift, and horizontal dilation is always going to be the same. So to find the value of the cosine graph, we can just say 2 and leave it blank for now, and x minus pi, because that's going to stay the same. So, oh wait, not the pi, I mean cosine, and plus 0, so we don't have to put anything. So what is this value going to be? It's not pi, that was a mistake. So a sine value, the sine function starts from middle, goes to top, goes to middle, bottom, and then the middle again. But a cosine starts at the top, goes to the middle, goes to the bottom, goes to the middle, but then goes back to the top. You should have a total of 5 points. 1, 2, 3, 4, and then a fifth point right there. So we can say that the graph has shifted 3 pi units, because this is the top of the graph. So we can say that the phase shift of a cosine graph would just be 3 pi over 2. And then that would be the same. So the only difference between the two graphs is the phase shift. Whereas in sine, it would have shifted to the right pi units, but in the cosine graph, it would have shifted to the right 3 pi over 2 units. Okay, so this graph is a little similar to the last one, except it has a couple more things to it. So first, let's start off by finding the amplitude again. So A. Okay, so we see that the middle point is at 2, and the top is at 4, and the bottom is at 0. So the difference between the top and the middle is 2, because 4 minus 2 is 2. And the difference between the middle and the bottom is 2, because 2 minus 0 is just 2. So we know that the amplitude is 2. And now for the B value, let's see if there's a horizontal dilation. So we see that the graph starts at pi over 2 and ends at 5 pi over 2. And the difference between 5 pi over 2 minus pi over 2 is going to be 4 pi over 2, which is also the same as 2 pi. So we know that there's no horizontal dilation because the period of a parent function of a sine function is just 2 pi. So there's nothing. And then now the h value is the phase shift, and let's see if the graph has moved anywhere. So the graph should have started at x equals 0, but since it's moved to the right pi over 2, we know that h is going to be pi over 2. Okay, and then now the k value, let's see if the graph has moved up or down, and yes it has, because the middle point starts at 2 instead of 0. So since it's moved up 2, we can just say that k equals 2. And now let's put it into the formula. Y equals 2 sine, and then we know that b is just 1, so we don't have to put anything. So x minus, and then h is pi over 2. So pi over 2, and then plus k, and we know that k is 2, so just plus 2. So that would be the equation for if it was a sine function. Now, once again, let's see what we would do if it was a cosine function. So, same thing as last time. The only thing that changes is the phase shift. So, y equals, we can put everything else, so 2 cosine, and then x minus, we can leave it blank for now, and then plus 2, because everything else stays the same. Now, what is going to be the phase shift? So, we know that cosine starts at the top, goes to the middle, bottom, middle, and then to the top again. So we see that if it was a cosine function, it would have moved pi units, because this is the top. This is the point at the very top. So we can just say that the phase shift is just pi. Okay, and once again, it's almost identical, except the phase shift is a little different, where sine is negative pi over 2, because it starts at the middle, and then this is pi, where it starts at the top. Okay, so now this graph is going to be a little different, because it actually has all of the values. So first off, let's find the amplitude again. So the amplitude is going to be 3, because the distance between 2 and negative 1 is 3, and the distance between negative 1 and negative 4 is also 3. So we can just say that the amplitude is 3. So then the next thing we should find is the horizontal dilation. First off, let's see if there is one. So the graph starts at negative pi over 2 and ends at 7 pi over 2. So there is a horizontal dilation, because the difference between the start and the end is going to be 7 pi over 2 plus pi over 2, so just the distance between it, which is 8 pi over 2, which is also the same as 4 pi. So there has been a horizontal dilation, because instead of 2 pi, it's now 4 pi. So now how do we find the b value? Well, we have to put it into this formula. 2 pi over x equals the new period, which we found is 4 pi. So if we do some cross multiplication, we get 4 pi x equals 2 pi, and if we divide both sides by 4 pi, we get x equals, this cancels out, this cancels out, and you get 1 over 2. So now we know that b equals 1 over 2. Okay, so next thing we should find is the h value. So the phase shift, okay, so is the start at the origin? No, it is not, because the middle point, or the first point, starts at negative pi over 2. So we can just say that h equals negative pi over 2. Okay? And then now the k value. So let's see if it's shifted down. And yes, it has, because instead of starting at y equals 0, it started at y equals negative 1. So we can just say that k equals negative 1. Okay, so now we can just put it into the equation. Y equals amplitude, so 3 sine, and parentheses b. Now we actually have a horizontal dilation, so we can just say 1 over 2, and then parentheses x minus. Now, here's where a bunch of people get tricked. So, just because it says negative pi over 2 doesn't mean you put negative pi over 2 here. It's going to be positive because x minus a negative pi over 2 is going to be the same as x plus pi over 2. So this and this are not the same, right? Because it's a different sign. So it's going to be x plus pi over 2. And then we know the k is negative 1. And so that's going to be the equation for a sine function. And now let's find the equation if it was a cosine function. So once again, we'll put in all the values except for the phase shift. So 3 cosine. And still going to be the same dilation, 1 over 2, x minus, and then we'll leave that blank for now, minus 1. Okay? So once again, we have to look at the top point. Where's the top point? So we can see that the top point is at pi over 2. So since cosine starts at top, goes to middle, bottom, middle, top, we can just say that this is the new phase shift. So it's, instead of plus pi over 2, it's going to be negative pi over 2. And we can box that in. And one thing to note, if it says 1 over 2, that means the graph has been stretched times 2. And because instead of the period being 2 pi, where it should have ended here, it's gone another period, so now it's 4 pi. And if this number was 2, if there's a horizontal dilation by a factor of 2, then the whole graph would have shrunk. So if it was above 1, if the dilation is above 1, then it would shrink, and if it was less than 1, then it would grow.